have told a 16 years old me that one day I would be living in five, six different countries and doing the things I'm doing today, I would have never believed you. So I was born and raised in Russia, but not the type of Russia that usually comes to your mind when you think about it. I actually come from the Asian part of Russia, the region of Tuva. And for those who don't know, Tuva is a remote, fairly isolated, quite poor republic in the southern part of Siberia, which is ethnically, linguistically, culturally quite different from the majority of Russian cities, let's say. So I lived there for 16 years. My parents are from there, my grandparents are from there. And to be honest, at that time when I was 16, my perception of the world was fairly limited. It was limited by what I was exposed to at the time, which was the love of my parents. So I imagined my life as, finishing school, getting a degree, getting married, having a job for life, and then having kids. That's how I saw life, and that's what I saw for myself. There was only one thing that was different. I wanted to leave that place. There are many reasons, and this is not the video about it, but I always wanted to leave. And this is when I left for the first time. I moved from Tuva to St. Petersburg after graduating my high school to study at university. And even though this is not a move between the countries, it kind of felt like so. If you can imagine, Tuva is a very small place with the population of 200,000 people, and St. Petersburg is an enormous city with 5 million cities, big opportunities, facilities, streets, transportation access, that really, really felt like a different country. And not just that, just ethnically and linguistically, it also was a different place. It was a different region. So I kind of did feel like I moved to a different country, the Russia that I used to read about in the books, not the Russia that I was growing up in. No, son, the light is terrible now. Well, but anyway, let's continue. So after maybe 3 years after I moved to St. Petersburg, I moved for the second time already, and that move was already between two different countries. I moved from Russia to Italy only for a limited period of time, for 8 months, as part of my study exchange program, and let me tell you, that move changed completely the course of my life. So once again, I was in a very similar situation. Different country, different culture, different people. This time also different language. And again, I felt completely lost in the beginning. I felt small, meaningless. I didn't know how to interact with other people. I didn't know how to... I didn't speak English at the time, so that made things a lot complicated. But yeah, I was really lost. I didn't know what is the right etiquette here, how to make friends with foreigners. I never interacted with foreigners before. So many things were new. But this time it was just different, I think because I moved for the second time, so I had more confidence in me, but also I didn't feel as much pressure, and I didn't feel as bad about myself this time compared to how I felt the first time I moved from my hometown to St. Petersburg. So that life in Italy exposed me to so many people, not just from my own country, but from everywhere. I met people from France, Germany, China, Brazil, Morocco, Portugal. I probably met people from every part of the world, and to me that was so excited. I remember going to university, being excited. I started learning English, I started learning Italian, I started learning French even, and it opened up my appetite for more. That move was really, really, really life-changing. And I remember that moment when I was in Italy and I swore to myself, for the next 10 years, I want to move around the world. I want to live everywhere. I want to live in Spain, I want to live in Asia, I want to live in the US, I want to move and live and absorb as much as I can. And that wish was prophetic in a way, because for the next years I lived in Nepal for around 4 months, where I worked on a volunteering project. Then I moved to Spain for a year, and I worked again on the educational project within Spanish regions. Then I moved to Portugal to do my master, and I'm living in Portugal today. I moved for a bit to France. I did my master's in France as well. So for the next 10 years, I was just constantly moving. And a lot of things are very similar when you move, right? You need to learn new social norms, you need to learn a language, probably you need to make new friends, you need to learn how to work with those people, you need to also solve a lot of administrative issues, like if you're an immigrant like me. But I felt like with every move I was gaining more confidence in myself. With every move I was building an identity that I have today. So if you're questioning, did it change much? Or if so, what changed? The short answer would be yes, and absolutely yes. I think when you live in my case, in 6 different countries, and when you travel to more than 25, and all of that in the most flexible, transformative time of your life, in your 20s, you just rebuild your identity all over again. And the thing is, I was growing older and trying to figure out who I was. My surrounding was shaping who I became. I went through multiple cultural adaptations, crises, feelings of being lost and being found again. I went through several relationships that didn't work out. That made a lot of impact on me as well. I gained friends, I lost friends, I found jobs, I lost jobs, so many things, so many processes. But more than anything, my values, beliefs, and principles change in the way that I never imagined them to change. So when I moved for the first, or actually the second time, I strongly believe that if you move somewhere, you have to become like the locals. You have to assimilate. You have to become part of that society completely. You have to forget where you come from and build this new identity of the country that you move into. And let's not forget, I was also very much embarrassed of my own origins. I was not accepting where I grew up, the society I was in before, and my family. A lot of things I was not accepting about myself. And very often, while trying to blend in, I would feel like an outsider. I would so often feel like I just don't belong there, And it would make me think that, okay, this is not the place I want to live in, that just doesn't work for me. While I was constantly trying to become like them and not be like me. So that was my thinking 8 years ago when I moved for the first or second time. When I moved already for the 6th time, I realized that neither of the extremes worked for me, and I don't think they work for anyone. I think the right balance, and this is where I found peace for myself, is to bring in together both of the worlds that you come from and that you're moving into. And let me just give you one example that I find to be very funny, but also very probably useful. As somebody who grew up in Russia and comes from Russian origins, my way of communication was, or used to be, very different from what it is today. I used to be super direct, straightforward, straight to the point, always, maybe even rude. I do believe I was kind of rude, and I do believe a lot of my people come across as rude just of the way we deliver our point. So when I moved to Spain and Portugal, in a culture that is not conflictual, that is not so straightforward, that is very soft, I noticed that with time I also became very soft and relaxed in the way I interact with others. My way of communicating with friends or with strangers became softer, became more polite, became more relaxed. And I really, really like this part of Portuguese and Spanish culture. It's so easy to deal with them. Same time, and it's also about communication. I know that, for example, Portuguese people are super indirect. When they want something from you, they would come to you, they would start talking about Yulia, how are you? How is your life going? They would ask 1,000 questions before actually asking what they came to ask. And I found it to be super annoying. It was fine sometimes, but to me it was like, come on, dude. Like, I know you came here to ask something. Please move straight to the point. And here I actually do prefer the Russian approach when we, especially in professional matters, when we move directly to the point. When we are not beating around the bush, we actually talk about the matter that we came to talk about. We are more direct in expressing also our feedback. But what I do here is that I apply the Portuguese and Spanish politeness into the way I deliver feedback or communicate with others. So blending Russian directness and straightforwardness with a Portuguese politeness and softness and a relaxed way of talking. I think that is the best way to describe what it means for me to move in between the cultures. Now let's talk about the fun part: relationships and friendships. I used to be super introverted, insecure, very shy, cold, reserved Russian girl. That was who I was maybe 10 years ago. My self-esteem was a disaster as well. It wasn't too high, it wasn't too low, it was just constantly unstable, Sometimes I would be very condescending to others, thinking I'm better than everyone else, and then sometimes I would feel like a little snail that is worse than everyone else and gonna end up living in a dumpster. It was a disaster. So as you might imagine, like, making friends for me at the time was incredibly difficult. Now, let's put this little person who was an insecure, young, shy, introverted girl and put her in different cultural environments. Yet you might imagine a disaster as well. In the beginning, whenever I would come to a new country, I would really struggle to open up and make new friends. And I did meet a lot of people. I did become more relaxed about my way of interaction with others. And I even managed to make a few very good friends. But what I really struggled with is to maintain friends. And this is also the challenge that comes to you when you constantly move, that you will have to leave a lot of the friends that you meet and make behind. And you would have to maintain those friendships through the distance, and you would have to make new friendships. And for somebody who is introverted by nature, that's not the easiest thing to do. But I think one of the most important things that I learned about friendships is that so many friends that you make in life are going to be temporary, and that is not good or bad. That's just the way it is. And I think that's something you have to accept. If you choose a life of moving around, you will have to accept that a lot of the friends that you meet will be only temporary. A lot of the friends that you will make, you will lose touch with. Some will stay, but some will go, and you will have to put in a lot of effort in order to maintain those friendships. And sometimes it's just not going to work out, and sometimes you will just have to let it go. And what also I think really changed in the past 10 years? I used to prioritize quantity over quality. I was meeting with everyone and I was thinking everyone was friend, and I was building such a high expectations from everyone I met, and I believe we are going to be friends for life. So I had a lot of, not even friends, but acquaintances, And then now, when I got older, when I moved through very different life circumstances, I started really to prioritize quality over quantity. I'm not running after meeting a lot of people anymore. I'm actually trying to focus right now on building the connections that matter, and building the connections and friendships that I hope will last through decades, which might not happen, but at least that's what I'm pursuing. I hope you're not bored, but please stick with me, because we've come to the juiciest part of this conversation, which is relationships. And I think relationship was actually the biggest topic where I saw my personal transformation in. I think it came naturally as I grew older and I went through a number of relationships with different people from different countries, and I think my view of relationship also changed a lot, because I saw how people date and build families in many different countries, and I learned a lot of good and the bad things from there. So what changed? The starting point: a European girl, an Eastern European girl who has a very superficial view of the relationship, who has never seen a respectful, loving and healthy relationship, I guess, between men and women growing up. And in my early 20s, when I was dating, when I still had this Eastern European mentality, I paid a lot of attention on how men take care of a woman. Yeah, gifts, flowers, messages, words, all that to me mattered more than the respect, the interest, the quality, the conversation. Now with time, I actually started to prioritize the intellect of people, the sense of humor, the kindness, the respect, not just towards me, but also towards other. I started to put more focus on inner qualities of people instead of external actions that men tend to perform for women in Eastern European cultures. But at the same time, I'm still an Eastern European woman, and I do appreciate romance and chivalry, because otherwise, how a boyfriend is different from a friend, huh? You explain to me.
One eternity later.
One of the biggest changes and shifts I think that really happened to me is the sense of what really matters. Before, I used to think about life in a very simple ways, like you finish your school, you get a degree, you get a job for life, you get married, you have kids, and then you die. That's the life. That's the way I saw life, and I would be very judgmental towards anyone who was kind of going off the established pathway. But then I lived in Russia, in Italy, in Spain, France, Nepal, everywhere, and as you go through so many different cultures, I guess you've come to realize that there's so many ways to live this life. There's so many patterns and understandings of what is right and what is not, and there is just no one correct way to live this life, I guess. I definitely became less judgmental over what is the right way of living. I started valuing freedom over certainty, experiences over possessions, and growth over settling down. But ironically, as I was moving through 6 different countries and I was doing it all on my own, I really started craving stability. I started craving for a family. I started craving for a partner, children, family. And I think it's something that came naturally to me as I probably grew older, but it also is something that came to me as I was constantly fighting for survival every time I moved, and I did it all on my own, and I just realized how suffocating it is to be constantly on your own. Here's the thing: when you move to different countries in a very young age, and when you do it all on your own, you certainly become stronger, you become resilient, you build this powerhouse identity that you didn't think you had before, but you also realize how hard it is to actually do it on your own, and how much easier and more productive, I guess, it would be to do it with somebody who has your back, who, when you have someone you can lean on to when you feel weak or when you just want to be weak. I also started craving for stability, for family, for children of my own, because that's not the luxury that I'm exposed to when I live alone somewhere else. Yeah, I started wanting traditions, celebrating things together, building I just started to realize that I actually want to build things and not to constantly move, living and burning everything behind. So this is a long video already, and to be honest I can talk for hours about it, but let's sum it up. When I first moved, I was 16. Today I'm 28. And the person I was back then and the person I am today are two worlds apart. And I think that shift came from actually two things. First, me naturally growing older and growing through all the life experiences that life was bringing my way, but also through me constantly moving from one country to another and adapting to new people, new ways of being, new ways of interacting, learning a language, basically, and all of it in my 20s, the most transformative and flexible time for you to build your identity. So moving didn't just teach me how to pack a suitcase and adapt to a new city. It actually taught me a lot on how to let go, how to embrace the new, how to start again, and how to be able to live with uncertainty. It taught me that identity and values are not fixed and they are constantly transforming if you're open to that transformation. And most importantly, it showed me that home is not just a place where you move to. Home is the people you meet, the lessons you learned, and the identity that you grow when you moved. Now I would like to hear from you if you ever left your hometown or your home country and you moved somewhere else, or maybe you want to move. I would like to hear more about your experience, your struggles, your challenges, and anything you would like to share. Thanks for being here. See you.